So, what does a life in the pursuit of peace look like? Are you looking for ways to achieve peace for yourself and your own community? Today, I sit down with a colleague of mine named Bassem. He directs what's called the Peace Institute and has a wealth of information to share with us about interfaith engagement, getting outside yourself, and how to pursue peace. Come join us on this episode. Bassem, welcome to Interfaith Conversations today.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to connect with you.
Bassem is one of these people that I reached out to through a friend, and he does incredible work throughout his community in Florida. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit about what Bassem has been up to. He's the director of the Peace Institute, and it focuses on interfaith and social engagement surrounding peace and programs that can be done in the community. He's also the executive director for American Islam, a national organization focused on helping dispel stereotypes and misperceptions about Islam and Muslims in general. I'm really grateful to have you on here today, Bassem, with all the wealth and wisdom. I bring the wannabe engagement, and Bassem brings the actual, really hands on the ground engagement. But I'm very grateful to have you here today, Bassem.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I just kind of wanted to start into, if you could share just a little bit about your background, kind of like where you grew up and being Muslim, growing up in the United States, and just some of that background.
Well, my family decided to come to the United States early in the 1990s, pretty much 1993, and we used to live in Kuwait. That's where I spent most of my childhood before leaving my original country of birth, Lebanon. That's where there was a lot of civil war during the early or mid-70s, late 70s. So my family decided to go to different Gulf states in the Middle East for refuge. Eventually, we settled in Kuwait for most of my childhood. As I said, that's where I actually learned English for the first time as I was growing up. And around the age of 13, my family decided to move full-time to the United States. Okay. And I say full-time because there was connections with the United States, especially in Florida, where my uncle and father went to Florida State University.
Okay.
And, in their college years. So we used to come visit every once in a while when we were living in Kuwait, to visit Disneyland and so on.
Right.
But then my parents decided to move to the United States full time. So we were pretty aware of the culture of the United States and so on. But our upbringing was in Kuwait, in a predominantly, obviously, Muslim country.
Were you there during the Gulf War, or did you end up having to live in the after effects of that kind of stage before you came to the U.S.?
Actually, we left literally about a month before Iraq invaded Kuwait.
Wow.
And, nobody knew anything about it. And I'm sure, in the background, away from the media, there was a lot of things moving around, but
Wow.
Most of the public didn't know anything about it. So the concept of war or definitely invasion was in no one's mind. Eventually, what happens is we leave, and I had some uncles from my father's side who lived in Kuwait who were left behind. And when we were pretty much settled by the month of, I believe, August, when the invasion began, we were pretty settled in Orlando.
Wow.
And obviously it was very surreal seeing the scenes of places we used to visit and knew about in Kuwait being invaded with Iraqi soldiers walking around. So that was, the first basically taste of chaos that I saw as a teenager. And we were familiar with it deep down in Lebanon during the Civil War, because during quiet times we would visit from Kuwait to Lebanon, visit extended family, and every once in a while there would be some skirmishes and violence, during that time. But a full-blown invasion was very, unknown for the Kuwaiti citizens. The closest to that would probably be in 1982 in Lebanon when Israel invaded Beirut, and that's where our family was from. And it was just remembering that time was also very interesting and reflective to what was happening to Kuwait. And obviously Kuwait is a small country compared to Iraq, but those are the memories that I had as a teenager and a child growing up in that part of the world.
So yeah, used to the unfortunately having to grow up in a space where conflict did affect both your family life and kind of your own personal life as you were growing up. And then coming from that, at least in some ways, gratefully at least being able to be out of Kuwait before the invasion, but seeing all the relatives and others still being back there, and then growing up in Florida through that experience. What happened next? What kind of, developed you to where, like, today you do a lot in peace and you do a lot in interfaith. Some people would go through that type of experience and go the opposite route, right? They would go through conflict and feel like there's a reason to not engage others that might have affected both your family or just the idea in general of your background. So what kind of led you as a teenager growing up in that environment to kind of what you do now?
Well, I mean, I can't take credit for where I am now because of my past. I believe, God has a plan for all of us and a purpose for all of us. Mm-hmm. And he has to put us through difficult situations within our, especially youth and upbringing, to get us ready for something that maybe we would not do otherwise. And this is very typical to what you read in the history of prophets and philosophers and thinkers and righteous people. In no way am I comparing myself to them, but I think all of us have a special purpose in life, and that's why God created us. So part of that is where I would reflect on my childhood and realize that if I didn't go through those things, I would not be thinking and behaving and treating other people and engaging with other people if I did not go through those things. And those things are not something planned, obviously. We go through the experience of life, but it is part and parcel of what develops us in our personality, in our character, in how we perceive the world. So, looking at all of this experience as a child and wondering, why is there conflict in the first place? Why is there constant injustices in the world? Mm-hmm. So those are type of questions I had, especially when I came to the United States, because as a teenager, you're pretty much catapulted into a whole new world. And it was different visiting the U.S. versus living here full time. And when I had to go through high school, early on, I was the youngest student amongst my classmates because the curriculum was different, and I had more advanced classes that I already took. So I was put into older level classes, and I excelled very easily to the point, people asked me for tutoring, for guidance, and so on. And to me, it was just normal information that I knew, but maybe for American kids, it wasn't that average. So it really got me into thinking about life, into thinking about, what's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of, religion and philosophy? Because when I came to the United States, not only was it a different world physically, but also you would engage with a lot of diverse people from all walks of life. That's the beauty of America. And I started to have Christian friends and Jewish friends and Buddhist friends and atheist friends, and I never had that back where I grew up. We knew about it, but it wasn't something a part and parcel of our engagement. And when I was catapulted in the United States, obviously I was forced into this question of, okay, what is all this diversity about? Why do people believe this way or think this way or act this way? And it also had to do with how the landscape of the United States was. I never forgot, on the first day of class to my high school, and I had my mother with me, and we walked through this massive arena, indoor arena, to get to classes. And it was bustling with kids and parents and, cafeteria tables. And I remember as we were walking, she told me, I want you to observe something. And she started pointing at different groups of kids. And she said, you see how, these kids are sitting to themselves, these other kids are sitting separately. And I said, okay, what are you trying to tell me? And she said, well, this is how it's done here. Now, at first, I didn't know what she was talking about. But later on, I realized she was pointing out that there was division based on ethnic or racial lines, in the United States. And some of it was natural, some of it was historic, and some of it was just how things are. So she started telling me, be careful who you hang around with and who you engage with. And I didn't know what she was really referring to. I was very naive at the time. So I just moved on. I went to my first class, and I remember I bumped into a Spanish teacher with my mom to try to figure out which classes to take. And she was very hospitable, very nice, got to know where I was from, and she guided me to my first class. And the class was an English class. So here comes the teacher, walks into the class, and I stand up as a sign of respect. But I realized all the other students were sitting down. So I said, okay, maybe they don't like this teacher. So I sat back down. And eventually the class went through, and we came to the very end, and he passed out a personal sheet you have to fill out with your name, address, all that good stuff. And I was filling it out, and I came across this item called race. And instantly, I had a thought, okay, why would they want to know how fast I can run? Because that's the only time I saw that word. But what confused me more was there were selections of color. Back then, there was white, black, brown. That was the reference back then. And I said, well, why would they want to know what favorite color I have? So I was completely confused. But just to finish the form, I just bubbled in anything. And I remember there was a Latino Hispanic kid next to me. And he turned to me, he saw my answer, and he said, that's not you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, that's not you. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And then the bell rang, and we had to move on. But I mentioned that story because that was the first introduction I had to the concept of race in America. It was very naive, very simplistic, and it was just based on words, how I saw the world. So, but surely the days, the weeks, the months, even the years went by, and I started realizing what was part of America. It was this diversity of race and ethnic, elements that was a reality that I had to contend with. So that delved me into studying American history more and learning about slavery and, civil rights and all of these things. And again, I didn't realize that was catapulting me into this world that was very strange to me. Because to me, I was very naive, and I thought, as a kid, everybody treated each other with respect, and everybody saw each other equal, and so on. And that was not the reality of history or the world. So slowly I started falling in love with philosophy, religion, history, and one thing kept leading to another, to the point of questioning faith and religion. And that's really what got me into the world of religion and philosophy, into that realm, and eventually graduating high school, not knowing what I wanted to do. And we might get into that as well. But
Sure.
those were the seeds that were planted, unbeknownst to me, about where I was headed in my life.
I love that example of the differences. You already are hit so much with the racial, ethnic differences that people have to face, every day in the U.S., and also the opportunities to kind of reflect on how to improve those said relationships. So, thrown from one cultural element in the Middle East straight into another
Sure.
one here in the U.S. So there you go.
Sure.
Well, so you said you started after that experience in school. You're learning how different groups work in the U.S. And you want to try and get more education and understanding of these different groups, philosophy and other things, to try and understand your world. So what was the next step?
Well, I would say coming out of high school, I graduated early, the age of 16, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. But I had, odd jobs, and knowing definitely I wanted to go to college, and I was actually interested in military service. So I was interested in the Marines. And sure enough, I got a call from a military recruiter when I graduated high school, but I was very young. You had to be 18. I was 16. But during those 2 years, I went to a local state college, and I took some odd classes and so on. But as I was finishing my 2-year degree, I took a world religion class. And I remember I had a very personable professor. He was actually a former pastor, and he actually gave me my first Bible, and as a gift. And he actually knew I was the only Muslim in the class early on, and he said, I want you to teach about Islam to the students. And I was like, me? I don't know. I don't know much. I'm still young. All I knew was what I knew growing up and so on. But I was not teacher material or scholarly material in no shape or form. But actually that pushed me into delving into religion and Islam more and more. And, being prepared to do this presentation in this class. And at the same time, I was, looking into the military. Preparing maybe for 18 to get a call. So I did my first class in his class, teaching Islam in front of everybody, and everybody loved it and loved how I was teaching. And he loved it so much, he said, I want to give you another day to finish your presentation, because people had so many questions. And I said, okay. So I'm still nervous and trying to do the best I can. And eventually I finished the second class, and we hit it off, me and the professor, really well. And that's when he gave me my first Bible. And I didn't think about it in any shape or form. I accepted the gift and thanked him, and I still have it with me in my library. But that's
awesome.
the first
That's
time.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's the first time I delved into Christianity and reading the Bible and falling in love with religions, because it was a world religion class, and I was studying all the other religions. And this is after what I was dealing with in high school, with the natural engagement in the world of religion and ethnicity and so on. So now it's getting more structured. But again, not knowing, not planning anything into the future, just going through these steps. And so I finished that class, got my degree, and I was getting ready to transfer to a university, still not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. But I got a call from the Marines at the age of 18. And I actually went through the process of interviewing and trying to figure out, is this the right thing for me and so on. And it was pretty much weeks, if not months, of that engagement until I came to the day of signing. And at the same time, my parents didn't know anything about what I was doing. So eventually I went to the recruiter office to sign the contract. And I sat there, and they did a marvelous job trying to recruit me and tell me about all the Muslims in the military and how diverse it is and so on and so forth. So I got the contract. I was reading through it, and I came through this statement that turned me to a different path. And the statement was that you are property of the United States government. So that phrase, I was like, hold on, what does this mean? You are property of the United States government. And they explained it to me like, yes, you are a private, you're a soldier. The government can give you orders, and you have to follow those orders, and so on and so forth. And for some reason, that did not sit well with me. That made me feel very uncomfortable, that I don't have a choice. And thinking, and this is not something, I was intending to think about it. It was just something natural that came to me. It's like something's off here. That's just how I thought about it. This is not comfortable to me. And that broke my heart. Why? Because I really wanted to join.
Yeah, you wanted to serve.
I wanted to serve. So I pulled back, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. If this is how you're explaining, and I don't have a choice, and you're going to train me to be pretty much a killing machine, I need to have a choice. I have a responsibility, and as they say, with great power comes great responsibility. So that's how I thought about it. So again, I go back not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I thought the military was the service, and that's why I still have such great respect for the military, because of discipline, because of the structure it has. Obviously, Islam and the military have a lot of focus on discipline. So that's what attracted me. But though that phrase did not sit well with me. So I moved on. I went to university. I applied to get a degree in marketing. That seemed the most easiest thing to do in business. And I took a marketing class. And in that class, I realized that marketing, with all due respect to the promoters and the marketers in the world, it just, the way it was taught and shown, it was like manipulation. It was about legally manipulating the people to buy things they don't really need and so on. So I was like, hold on, that doesn't sit well with me either. But at the same time, I took an economics class, and it was macroeconomics, how the world works with money and finance. And for some reason, I gravitated to that. And I asked questions of the professor about my future and this and that, and she gave me good advice. She said, you know what, if you take a few extra classes, if the economics is the path you want to take, you can literally end up with 2 degrees and be a double major. And that's exactly what I did. So I ended up with a bachelor's, to make a long story short, with economics and business administration. But the last semester at my degree, graduating, I did an internship with a financial firm in Orlando, Florida. And it was one of the top financial firms in the city. And I worked 3 months for free for this financial advisor. He was great. Him and his wife were working at their business, and they asked me to be an intern. And when you're an intern, you're pretty much a fly on the wall. Nobody really worries about you. But if you pay attention, you can learn a lot. And that's what I did. I started learning a lot about the world of finance. And to me, and again, with all due respect to the finance majors out there and the financial industry, there was a lot of unethical behavior going on in the background that I saw. And that did not sit well with me either. I loved what I did, helping people save for retirement, putting their kids through college, all of that. And then I got an offer from the same financial advisor to join the business. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't feel right about this industry. It's not what I wanted to do. And that was shocking to me because I spent pretty much my college career trying to get this degree for that field. So I walked away from that opportunity and then pretty much traveled the world for 3 months on my own, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I visited Europe, I visited family in Lebanon, I did my pilgrimage as a Muslim practitioner after
Wow.
college, and came back because I was very much now into spiritual mode, and I had all this passion about spirituality, philosophy, religion. I became a very serious practitioner of Islam, but always open to learn about other cultures. And I remember my friends, even in college, would invite me to their church and synagogue and Buddhist temple, and I would go. I would say, yeah, I would love to go. And I started engaging in that world, not just from books, but from real life. And that catapulted me into the world of interfaith dialogue and study, and slowly but surely into where I am today.
Wow. Well, that's an amazing story where you go from, from one thing that you think you want to do to another thing, and then it just
Sure.
doesn't fit right, and then you go to the
Yeah.
next. Um, but it's interesting that for you, you come from this background where you see divisions, you see conflicts, and yet through that, you're finding ways to resolve that, right? Maybe there's a way to do this for yourself to give back, but you continue to pursue and find something that really resonated with you. So, for people who may not know, when you do a pilgrimage to Mecca, one of the things, a big part of that is it's one of the main pillars of Islam. And if you can do it in your lifetime, you're encouraged to do so. And it's just a remarkable experience for many people where you go to Saudi Arabia, you go to Medina, you go to Mecca, and there's all these pieces and elements to it to kind of do this whole pilgrimage. And so I'm curious if you could tell a little bit for our listeners and watchers what going through and doing the Hajj meant to you at that period in your life, and kind of how that opened your eyes as you went to the next step.
I've never really found anything comparable to that journey, and that's that's the way it's supposed to be, because I was in a time of my life where, as I said, I was in a spiritual high, where I started seeing things clearer, and I started seeing, how complicated the world was, from history, from reality, and from current events, and all the things I've went through. The pilgrimage got me into a whole new realm where I started seeing the Muslim world for what it is, and seeing its own diversity and its own issues internally and externally. The good, the bad, and the ugly. You're still dealing with human beings wherever you go. I saw and encountered different minor conflicts here and there that I not engaged with, but I saw firsthand. And all of these things I feel were messages and lessons that were being embedded into me to say, okay, this is how things are. This is how people act in these scenarios and so on. And then this is how I acted in certain scenarios. It started showing me who I was and what I was really passionate about and what really I was plugged into, which was really spirituality and conflict resolution and dealing with people. It was just natural to me. It wasn't something I was like pursuing for the future. And then eventually I finished my pilgrimage, and it was very, very emotional, very spiritual, and then came back to the United States and still not knowing what I wanted to do. So I pursued an education with a master's degree. But instead of business, I wanted to do a little bit more in public administration. And that was basically either working with an international conglomerate like maybe the State Department or the United Nations, or working with a nonprofit. That's how I believe I was guided at that time to get into that world, because of my experience in the pilgrimage and the Muslim world. And then I started seeing things clearer. And I started seeing things clearer. And then eventually I finished my pilgrimage, and it was very, very emotional, very spiritual. And then came back to the United States and it was really very, very emotional, very spiritual. And then other experiences so far in my life.
So you go in and you have this experience going on the Hajj and all these other trips, and it kind of gives you that perspective. I wanted to tie in someone else who came from the U.S. that did the same thing, that came back and it opened their eyes to peace. Some other viewers might remember on another episode where I bring up Malcolm X, where
Hmm.
Malcolm X, coming from the U.S. with its own divisions,
Yeah,
going to the Middle East and doing the Hajj for himself, and he was interspersed with all sorts of people who are Muslim that are doing the same pilgrimage. And he sees for the first time that people of different race categories can sit down at a meal, enjoy each other's company, and never have any worry about race, not
yeah,
caring any different other than we're both brothers in the same faith. And coming back to the U.S., having that kind of expanded vision and wanting to moderate and focus on a different path for him in his life. So that's, I was trying to think of a corollary, similar type experience from the Hajj. So thanks for sharing that. We talk about how you are the director of the Peace Institute. So how did that become a thing? What was the inception for Peace Institute? And could you tell people a little bit about what it is?
sure. Coming back from the travel, there was a program that I learned about for foreign exchange students who were coming to the United States, and the organization was looking for host families. So me and my family, we decided to host a teenager from Uzbekistan, and it was a program through the State Department. Basically, it was started right after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and all of these new countries started popping up in Eurasia: Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and so on. The whole concept of the program was to bring students, future leaders of their country, to the United States to learn about our republic and our democracy. So we were interested, so we hosted a kid, a teenager. His name was Otobek. He's probably a doctor somewhere by now, and an adult with a family. It was so interesting because when we hosted him for about a year, we had to pretty much adopt him for a whole year. He lives with us, he eats with us. We put him in a high school. Actually, he registered in the same high school I graduated from in Orlando, Florida. And that was my first going back to that high school and going through that process. And I was seeing myself in him, how he was a teenager at that time, going through that process with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I became like a big brother to him. I was really intrigued by that world, hosting families and foreign exchange and the State Department. And eventually there was a director of that program who we already knew, and she was leaving. So the president of the organization, he was looking to hire someone to take over her spot. And me and my family were very engaged with this program, even though we were just hosting one kid, but they had programs with other kids. So the president approached me because he knew I was passionate about international affairs and things like that. And he said, what do you think about taking this job? And I was like, me, I don't have any experience. So, my family talked to me and said, yeah, this might be your chance to, go to a different realm. And I loved international affairs. I loved working with young people. So it looked like it was a good fit. So generally, I did that for about 2.5 years. Became the new director. I worked with an assistant. We actually had we finished with the students that year, and we brought more students the following year. And I was sent to training. I went to the State Department. It was really an amazing experience. And we actually took a group of the new students to Washington, D.C. On a field trip for like a week. And we had now kids from France and Europe and Asia and, of course, Eurasia and Latin America. And we had to now find host families. So instead of me being the host, I had to find them. And during that time, 9/11 happened. The tragedies of 9/11 happened.
Wow.
And everybody, obviously, it was a life-changing experience for the whole world. And now I was dealing with international affairs. I was engaged in those issues about, okay, the safety of the kids, are they going to go back, all of that. So at the same time, I did some speeches here and there because of where I was coming from, and through friends or family, people would ask me to come and just share my experiences. This is before 9/11. I remember my first speech was at a church in a city here next to my high school, and my mother, she bumped into this lady in the grocery store, and she was very intrigued where we were coming from, and this was when I was in high school, and she said, would you mind having your son come to our church and give us his experience living in Kuwait after the war? This is the first Gulf War. So that became my first speech ever in America at a local church about the culture we were coming from. So moving ahead to 9/11, now people knew a little bit about me, so they asked me to come and speak about Islam, Muslims, the Muslim world, what was happening. And I was, obviously at that time, I was already engaged with the international program. So the demand and the focus on Islam and Muslims was so high, I started also volunteering with the local Muslim community because there was hysteria all over the country.
Right.
And I was just a volunteer. I didn't have any plan to work or have a career in that field at all. I just loved what I was doing already with the nonprofit. So now, 2003, the Iraq invasion happened, and Afghanistan happened generally immediately after 9/11. But
right.
The Iraqi war was a whole different realm in global politics and global affairs. So eventually, the Muslim community and the Muslim organization approached me with a job to be like a spokesperson for the Muslim community locally in Orlando, Florida, and to do speeches full-time, to talk in churches and schools, trying to challenge a lot of the rhetoric and the stereotyping and the misinformation about Islam and Muslim. And I was shocked. Like, I was volunteering, but now you're taking me to a different level that I not prepared for. But, the president of the organization, he saw something in me, so he offered me the job. And we started in our volunteer realm locally, as all Muslim communities around the country started organizing to try to really challenge a lot of this rhetoric. We did the same thing locally. So we created an entity, believed in connecting and presenting the true aspects of Islam. And it was known as the Center for Peace. And it was part of the local Muslim community. So eventually, it grew for years ahead, always known as the Center for Peace. And I would say about 5 years or 6 years later, I would say after 9/11, we started getting more organized. And that's when I was hired full-time to take over the leadership of the entity, the Center for Peace. And eventually, later, we changed the name to the Peace Institute because it was focused on interfaith dialogue, education about Islam and the Muslim community. But what we also realized as things escalated around the country, other communities were facing the same problem of misinformation and stereotyping, whether based on race, religion, ethnicity, and so on and so forth, and social issues. So eventually, the Peace Institute, to make a long story short, we started not only engaging in Muslim issues and Muslim education to non-Muslims, but also about other issues and social justice and interfaith dialogue and race issues, but all in an effort to bring people from different backgrounds to see each other and to talk with each other and to rid each other of misinformation about each other. So that was the mission of the Peace Institute. And our slogan is opening minds, uniting hearts. And that's how it mushroomed into what it is today.
Wow, that's amazing. First off, Bassem, it looks like you've just been kind of guided right through this life. I don't know if you're in the front of the train or you're being dragged to where you're supposed to be going, but either way,
Sure.
there's something for you to achieve. And it's interesting that you talk about taking things that happen in a negative light because of September 11th attacks, where hijackers hit the towers and hit the Pentagon, and we're planning another location as well. And the, like you said, hysteria behind this that just targets the Muslim community, that one particular small group that's based out of Afghanistan now represents for all of Americans, all Muslims. And just
Yes.
the unfortunate nature of that kind of scenario uh, is just, yeah, that's pretty crazy. But you then took that, found ways to help respond to your group, but then found ways to expand that to not just uh, misinformation for people who are of the Islamic faith, but now to do it for people beyond just your faith, to the community at large. So that's quite remarkable to take something and expand it like that. So how did you build that? How did you go from taking what you wanted to do in your own community to try and help resolve these issues and do that next step? Because I even think people in my own faith or any other faith struggle getting outside your own community and expanding that so that the same vision is connecting to everyone else's needs and vision as well. How did you make that kind of jump?
To me personally, it was pretty natural because I think looking back at all of this, as you said, I was being guided into this world unbeknownst to me about all of these steps in my life so far. So it really came naturally to me, regardless of the topic, regardless of the audience, regardless of the issue we're dealing with. The formula is the same. So I followed this principle that I believe are the bedrocks of any free society and well-informed society and safe and balanced society. And it's basically three pillars. The first pillar is to access accurate information about the topic, whatever it is. It has to be accurate. It cannot just be information. I mean, the word information is everything. Good, bad, ugly, propaganda, facts, fiction. That's all information. But when it's accurate, it's based on truth. It's based on fact. It's based on evidence, and so on and so forth. So that to me was what was important. To me, it's not what you believe. It's what are you basing your belief on, right? So that's the first is it has to be accurate information because that's the source. I tell my students all the time, what is the most important page in a research paper? And they always say it's the works cited page, so that the reader knows where you're getting your information from. Is it opinion or is it based on some fact and some study there was consensus behind? So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is creating a platform for critical thinking. That's what dialogues are all about. I want to hear other perspectives, not just my own, but other perspectives, even though I disagree with them. But at least now you hear the other side. So that to me became crucial in a world that is taken over by the media. So the media, the mainstream media, as we call it, is really promoting, whether directly or indirectly, and that's always debatable, how we think about the world. And it's subtle, it's sublime. It's not something we feel. But to me, what I realized is that's where hate comes from. That's where suspicion comes from. It's not because you met that person and understood who he or she was. It's what you assume about that person. There's a great quote by Stephen Hawking who said, the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. Is what you assume to be true that is not, that is worse to you than if you didn't know anything about that subject in the first place. And that's where the adage is, ignorance is bliss sometimes. Because you have a clean slate to start from, but not all these issues of hearsay and gossip and media that we take into our brains, and then we make a judgment on a person or a subject. So critical thinking is creating that platform for that free expression to take place, as long as it's respectful, of course. So that's the second pillar. And the last pillar is basically action. What do you do with this information? What do you do with this thinking and this dialogue. You act on it by serving other people. So to me, that is the formula I've used and we've used to make sure that we don't just gather information, we don't just think about it, but we act on it. You know, they say that knowledge is power. I disagree with that. I think that's half true. Knowledge is as powerful as how you act on it, for good or for bad. So action is what we need. When I was learning about American history, what I fell in love with in the Constitution is those three words that starts the Constitution: we the people of the United States of America. And I wondered, I always asked, why did the founders choose to make those words big and the rest you can hardly read? Because that's the basis of our republic. It's us. We are the people. We are the government. And I fell in love with that concept for pretty much all my life to this day. But unfortunately, what I realize is we are forgetting that. Or some of us have already forgotten it. And we've just turned over this concept to the elites. And I don't want to get onto a soapbox here, but to other entities, special interests, elites, oligarchs, whatever. And they are running the world. And that is very unfortunate. So we depend on them. And that's where I believe where we are. The problem is not us. We can get along as teachers and bakers and garbage collectors and neighbors. We can get along. It doesn't matter. Literally, I've seen it. Black, white, you know, man, woman, rich, poor. We can get along because we have to get along in the street. But it is outsiders or, you know, upper echelons or people who want to manipulate us to stay in power that create division amongst us that is not real. They make it up and say, these are the boogeymen. This is the community you have to be afraid of. You have to be afraid of Muslims. You have to be afraid of whites, blacks, Latinos, immigrants, what have you, refugees, whatever it is. You know, in that time, in that generation, that's where now we're going the wrong direction. And I know that because I also studied in my college years Nazi Germany. I wanted, because I'm a student of history, and I always asked this question: how in the world did these citizens end up killing their fellow neighbors in Germany, of Jews and gypsies and disabled people? How did it happen? It's amazing. And what catapulted me to find the answer was this quote from Hitler, who once said, "What luck for rulers that men do not think. What luck for rulers that men do not think." Which means we don't think. We're not critical thinkers. We're not teaching critical thinking anymore. We're going by emotion.
We're lemmings. We just follow the
Exactly.
TikTok or Instagram roll, and we're good.
Of course, now, yes. So that was like mind-blowing to me. And here we are. The world is going backwards. And that to me is what drives me, is yes, we might not be able to change the world, but we can, you know, be the world for one person, as one quote says. And that's really what keeps me going, that I know there's a God that sees everything, knows everything. He has a plan for everything. But all our job is asking ourselves, looking in the mirror, what am I doing? Am I a builder or am I a destroyer? Am I a healer or am I someone who's creating division? So that's really what keeps us going. The possibilities are endless. We've seen it. I've seen it in my years so far, where people who were very hateful towards Muslims, they became friends once they understood what Islam was and who we were and what the actual dividing mechanism was. So, and here we are once again in a divided world. We thought COVID was going to wake us up and make us more compassionate and more respectful, but unfortunately it's not. It's made us worse in a sense, because we were so cooked up and we're like expressing ourselves in negative ways. but God help all of us eventually.
I had two thoughts that came up when you were talking there. The first one that came to mind is a phrase that I like to use sometimes, which is be a part of the solution, not the problem. And
Yeah,
I think that can apply in anything, right? I think of it in a work
absolutely.
environment, right? Like fixing something at work, but it also can be your family. It could be your friends. It could be your
Yeah,
community. It could be your nation, right?
yeah,
Which is be a part of the solution, improve where we need to go. Don't just complain about what we don't have or aren't. Let's create this. Let's be actors. Let's make this happen. The other thought it made me think of is when I had spent some time in Jordan between my undergrad and graduate degrees. I remember I helped in Palestinian neighborhoods in Amman, and I loved it. It was such an awesome experience. One of the things that was interesting is we were helping at a school, and after school, the teachers would be hang out at the school and spend some time with each other. So they'd invite us to talk with them. And I remember one of the aides that was there helping, teaching aides. I know she was from a more conservative background in Islam. By the way she talked, she dressed, kind of what she valued. And as we talked, it was interesting because at one point she just looked at us and she said, I don't understand. Can you answer a question for me? I said, yeah. She said, why do Americans hate us? Why do
exactly.
Americans hate Arabs? I mean, she's a down to earth person, and she had just asked a really honest question. You know, why do Americans hate us? Because she was, reeling from all these wars that we have already talked about. And we had a really fruitful conversation after that wonderful mother who just wanted to know, why can't we get along? Right? And the whole conversation, and we had these multiple times in that school, was the everyday person can connect. We want to connect. Often it's these bigger issues that we've let go over our heads, or governments or the media or business decides that we have to live in certain categories and we can't learn and talk to each other. I think that's what's so great about the things that you're doing, Bassem, with the Peace Institute. I love that three pillar formula on how to work past differences and make positive change. And so I think that gives people a lot of things to think about there. I think that's amazing. For listeners, what I'd say is I'll put a link in the description so that you have a chance to look at the Peace Institute and what Bassem does over there. And I definitely recommend it because there's wonderful resources that are available on there on how to do these type of things in your own communities. So it's very action oriented. I think, like Bassem has said, that's a big important thing for the things that they do. So definitely check that out. I think everybody has things that we want to do to try and improve the world, but we don't know how. Or how do I go about doing it? I really appreciate all the time Bassem spent with us today. Perhaps there's another time we can even talk about some more things on here, Bassem. There's just more discussion points we could talk about. But one of the
Sure.
things I wanted to bring up was the idea of what peace really is. And as I was contemplating this, it made me think about, peace by its very definition requires you to take yourself and reconcile to something beyond your own self-interest. Maybe it's your neighbor. Maybe it's who you work with. Maybe it's that person online you really want to, say that really mean thing to, but you need to recognize, I need to reconcile myself with this other person. So I have to act in a particular way. So one of the things I guess I can ask you before we go is, what is peace, and how do people realistically make peace?
I would say it is uncomfortable engagement. There was a story I never forgot hearing about it on the radio years ago. And this was during like the anniversary of the Vietnam War. And it was a story of I think he was in his 60s or 70s. And this was an American soldier who went back to the village he visited when he was a soldier during Vietnam as a veteran. But obviously he visited in peace times. And he met a soldier of the Vietnam side that the United States was fighting, who he met in the battlefield. And they encountered each other in obviously hostile time. And I don't remember the whole story of what happened during their engagement, but what literally brought me to tears hearing this story on the radio, is they met each other and they embraced each other and they started crying with each other in their 60s and 70s. And the American soldier, he was testifying to this experience, and the reporter asked him, why are you so emotional after all these years, all these decades? And he said, because I almost killed him, and here I am looking at him as my friend, as my neighbor. That story resonated with me for the rest of my life. Like, even after all these years, forgiveness can happen, peace can happen between enemies, so-called enemies. And that's why I said earlier that whoever they might be out there who are trying to create division amongst us, it's not real. It's like an illusion, like fear. It's a mental illusion. So when I say peace is uncomfortable engagement, is doing what this former U.S. soldier did and what that Vietnam soldier did, is visit each other, engage each other in peace times, and saying, I'm sorry, to each other. They were put in that situation. They did not want to kill each other, because that's the human spirit. We don't want to hurt each other. We don't want to take each other's lives. But we are put in these situations, unbeknownst to us, by whatever powers out there, for whatever goals they have, and they destroy lives. They destroy communities. So to me, the solution is not only uncomfortable engagement, but also being a good neighbor. And that's why maybe another time we'll talk about it. We have what's called, and the viewers can learn more about it on our website, called the Golden Rule Initiative. All religions agree on one rule amongst all the other disagreements theologically and ideologically. We all agree on one rule, the Golden Rule: doing unto others as you would want them to do unto you. That is called empathy. Similar to what you talked about, how we perceive each other. Perception is reality, but it's based on misinformation many times. So the question of that sister who asked you in Jordan, why do Americans hate us? I don't believe Americans hate anybody. Americans are beautiful people. I'm part of them. I'm one of them. But they are misinformed many times. And with misinformation comes miscategorization. And from miscategorization comes hateful rhetoric. And God forbid, from hateful rhetoric comes violence. And that's where we are today. So to break that, we need to start, as I said, with the formula: seek and search for accurate information, think critically and patiently about this information, and act on it by service to your community and to others that are like you or not. And you will see a better world and a better community blossom out of all of this.
Wow. I want to thank you, Bassem, for coming on today and sharing with all of us what a life looks like of striving to reconcile, to have those uncomfortable conversations, to create peace. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your thoughts, and definitely invite everybody over to the Peace Institute. You'll see the link below. And hopefully we can have Bassem back and share more of his just thought-provoking experiences and ideas with us. But the whole goal here, Interfaith Conversations, is to be inspired and then act from what you've been able to learn from somebody else's experience. So again, Bassem, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for everything you're doing.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this episode with Bassem. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed learning about his story, coming from where he grew up in Lebanon and then going to Kuwait and then getting out of Kuwait right before the Gulf War, but still being in the United States and starting to see in a new location how the dynamics of race, religion, culture, and other things start to intermix, and what is his place in that? And then how does he find that need for peace in his own life? So I thought that was really neat. I'm glad we had Bassem on, and I look forward to being able to have him on again. Just some key points that stood out to me as we finish. Up here is the 3 pillars that he brought up about making a safe and balanced society. So I can review those three real quick again for you. So first he said, access accurate information about a topic. I think this is so key. If you don't understand a topic and you get it from all these different sources that you haven't verified where that's coming from, you already set yourself up for either continuing biases or spreading misinformation about a group or a faith or a particular event. Number two, creating a platform for critical thinking is essential. Creating a place where you can dialogue back and forth about one side of things and then look at another gives you the opportunity to look at things in depth. It lets you see where there are gaps or holes or where you can feel more informed about a particular topic. And then number three, he said, is action. It's not enough to have information. It's not enough to interpret or critically think about that information, but it's then to act on that clear information you now possess. And so I thought that was really helpful. And I think you can do that in your own life. You can share that with your friends. You can do that kind of stuff in your own community. That's all really important. I think another big part that he also talked about is the idea that it's not that knowledge is power. I guess that's half true, as he said. But knowledge is as powerful as how you act on it. It's interesting because when I went to grad school, I went to a school that had a school motto that said, knowledge crowns those who seek her. Perhaps some of you know where that's from. I won't tell you. You'll have to find it for yourself. There's your little tidbit to go look it up. But I always kind of struggled with that because I don't know if it's fully true. You can learn as much information as you want, but does that really crown you? Does it really give you the ability to make a difference? I think partly, but I think there's the other side of the coin. And I would say knowledge crowns those who seek and act on that knowledge. And I think that follows really well with what Bassem talked about. So we are glad that you're able to join today on Interfaith Conversations. This is a place where we really try and connect with each other's faith and beliefs. We like to knit hearts together, open minds, and all those things, which really aligns with what Bassem's trying to do. So please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. The more you share, the more these type of stories that help bring not just a feel good, but do good message. Please feel free to share it. We are so excited to continue to bring out more content. There's more interviews I'll be having coming up and other things I'll be putting out now a lot more frequently. So feel free to reach out to us and we look forward to hearing from you. So I'll leave you at that. Now, whether you say shalom, salam, or namaste, you can be the change the world needs today.